The Biden administration is reported to have supplied former Moldovan MiG-29 planes to Ukraine as a source of replacement components for the country's surviving aircraft. There have been countless reports about the condition of the MiG-29 jets that Ukraine will get from Moldova, but according to many reports, the United States purchased approximately 20 of them in 1997. Some of these outdated MiG-29s were used to train American fighter pilots as attack aircrafts in simulated air-to-air combat. The U.S. Defense Department spokesperson, John Kirby, did not provide any specifics, but he did state about Ukraine, today they seem to have more jet fighters at their disposal than they did 2 weeks ago. Without going into too much detail, I'd say they've received additional aircraft and supplies to expand their fleet. Regardless of the fact that Western countries have progressively increased their military supplies to Ukraine, including heavy weapons such as self-propelled howitzers, mine-resistant armored vehicles, and even Mi-17 helicopters, the desire for modern fighter jets remains unsatisfied. Western forces have been pressured for weeks to supply Ukraine with new fighters. To avoid escalation, the U.S. rejected the idea of sending MiG-29s from Poland, Bulgaria, or Slovakia, fearing intensification. Although Ukraine claimed that it could switch to a new jet in a matter of a few weeks, using Western fighters such as the F-16, F-18, or even the F-15 would give them a major boost in the war against Russia. Regardless, this option attracted even less attention than the previous one. Finally, the Ukrainian Air Force pilots decided to take matters into their own hands and develop a new approach on their own. Under the #BuyMeAFighterJet campaign, they personally called to the world's millionaires who were sympathetic to their cause to buy and transfer the warplanes they required so they could remain in battle. Ukraine has only gotten one batch of MiG-29 Fulcrum jet fighters from the U.S. so far. Although it is unclear that the Ukrainian Air Force wants or does not want this, it still shows that Western countries are increasing their military support and commitment to this war. After investing a lot of money and lives, Ukrainian defenses may have bought enough time to bring in the necessary warriors in the medium to long term. They will have to step up their game as time runs out. Nevertheless, Ukraine has not received any fighter planes. According to John Kirby, the Pentagon's chief spokesperson, Ukraine has received different types of aircraft spare parts and not aircrafts as a whole. According to a story published, Kirby meant that Ukraine did not obtain the entire aircraft. After receiving spare parts from the United States and other countries, more than 20 previously grounded planes were brought back to life. Kirby expressed regret for his mistake. There was a Twitter post by the Ukrainian Air Force which said, "We did not receive any aircraft from our friends. We only received some spare parts and some components. This allowed us to use the equipment and spare parts in our fighter jets, which helped us in our war against the Russians." A report on the White House's talks with Poland about transferring MiG-29s to Ukraine was published in March, and it's been on our radar ever since. As a result of Warsaw's recommendation that the planes be transferred into American custody before being handed over to Ukraine, that plan was scrapped and the planes were returned. According to Kirby, "We do not support the supply of additional fighter aircraft to Ukraine's Air Force at this time." According to U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon, the costs of escalating hostilities with Russia exceeded the risks of Europeans receiving Soviet-era fighter jets and their limited utility. For their part, Ukraine's president and other top government officials have repeatedly called for warplanes to oppose Russian aggression and seize control of international airspace. Since then, the government has maintained that sovereign countries can transfer warplanes at will. U.S. Air Force official said, "We have never opposed European states sending MiGs to Ukraine and have always maintained it's up to European countries to determine if they want to send their MiGs." Consequently, we must wonder what is preventing the planes from being transferred. Ukraine's military now has access to helicopters and drones without restrictions, making March look like a distant past. Raptor drones capable of striking Russian targets have been given to Ukraine by Turkey, which is a NATO member. Many European and American officials have stated that the use of jet fighters is Russian President Vladimir Putin's red line. They appear to believe that Ukrainian MiGs are a step too far for Putin, and they may even have hard intelligence on the subject. More fighter planes flying off from still operational airfields may be the furthest thing from his thoughts. According to former acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller, Poland is worried about what Russia would do next. Last week, he told us that officials in Warsaw connected to him feel that Poland is Putin's next target. If it doesn't give Ukraine planes, Poland might be spared an invasion. Other countries with MiGs, such as Slovakia, may not agree with this statement. For several months now, Ukraine has been pleading with the West for access to new fighter aircrafts. Fighter pilots in Ukraine are now putting in extra effort to improve their skills and make a statement. There have been reports in the Western media from Ukrainian fighter pilots, including Juice and Moonfish, as well as their MiG-29 squadron commander and an anti-aircraft officer, that recent foreign weapons shipments have been short on new ground and air defense weapons. It was a condition of their interviews that their genuine identities and whereabouts remain anonymous. The Ukrainians must stop Russian cruise missiles. An anti-aircraft officer said, "We need new systems that can detect cruise missiles, particularly small or supersonic ones. Russia's X-22 rockets, for example, pose a threat to Ukraine." MiG-29s, Su-24 Fencers, and Su-25 Frogfoots were among Ukraine's Soviet-era fighter planes. If they possessed a newer plane with better radar, their pilots would have been able to destroy a couple of Russian cruise missiles. The cruise missile radar lock is almost impossible for the existing Moonfish jets, according to the company. The ability to turn them off in current scenarios was mostly done on infrared search locks. If it has a thermal signature, it can be destroyed. This includes 140 Russian planes that were shot down by the Ukrainian Air Force. There have been setbacks, but the company won't say how many. Moonfish is correct in pointing out that there are currently more pilots than jets. The pilots aspire to operate F-16s or other aircraft of a comparable caliber. Managing this platform only takes a few days, they claim, and may speed up follow-on training by having different groups of pilots specialize in the Falcon's varied capabilities, such as SEAD. As a result, they believe that Ukraine is unable to meet the Air Force's demands because of its substantial representation in the general staff. From plane loads of Javelin anti-tank missiles just before the invasion, to M777 howitzers by spring, to HIMARS rockets and truck-launched Harpoon missiles in recent weeks, the United States has supplied Ukraine more than $6 billion in arms since February. However, transferring non-Western fighter jets from other Eastern European countries has proven impossible. Former Pentagon spokesman John Kirby warned in March that sending Polish MiG-29s to Ukraine would be regarded as escalatory and may provoke a big Russian reaction. When asked about the aid package's absence of planes by reporters last week, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the aid was geared on Ukraine's immediate needs in the Donbas conflict. Last Monday, the United States pledged an additional $1 billion in humanitarian aid to help the Syrian people. In addition to the S-300 air-to-air missiles and portable anti-aircraft missiles, Ukraine has an extensive aerial defense system. Russia has been unable to establish air supremacy over Ukraine and control the skies due to the usage of a variety of systems. As a result of heavy Russian artillery and missile fire and airstrikes, the Ukrainian Air Force has mostly held its own. According to an official in the Ukrainian Army, in the first week of March, Ukraine had 56 fighter planes in its arsenal, accounting for around 80% of its fixed-wing fighters. According to the official, the Ukrainians were only flying 5 to 10 missions a day with their planes. That's all for today. If you like this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for any new updates. See you in the next one.